Hey, everybody. Tonight I have for you podcast number 012. Today's podcast is titled, How Neat Is That? Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of your weekly Limitless Life Network podcast. I'm Dr. Pete Lombardi, and this is the Limitless Life Network podcast where we flesh out the limitations that are preventing you from reaching your goals and living the life that you deserve. This podcast is for you if you want to live a life with less limitations and more freedom with a healthier mind, body, and spirit. The Limitless Life Network brand was born out of the scripture in Ephesians 3:20, which reads, "Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us." And I want to help you to recognize and tap into that limitless power that is at work within you. And so today's episode, whether you're listening to it in the evening or the day, but I'm recording this in the evening, is entitled, How Neat Is That? It's actually the question, and it's actually comes from the title itself comes from a YouTube video or a couple of YouTube videos that my boys and I watched that are kind of a spoof. These guys are in the mountains filming each other, and this guy's acting really goofy, and he keeps saying, "How neat is that?" And anyway, because it's about nature a bit. So the backstory behind these points that I have for you tonight, which 5 points we're going to discuss, is coming from this past weekend. I spent my annual trip that I take to the Adirondack Mountains in New York State to do some whitetail deer hunting at a camp that I've gone to for 26 years now. And hunting in the big woods of the Adirondack Mountains is not an easy task at all. It's really challenging, and I love the adventure that's associated with it. But more so, I think I get a lot out of the observation of nature. And so, spending, the entire day on a solo hunt by yourself in the woods, it really increases one's awareness of your surroundings and everything that's happening around you. So it's kind of hard to put it into words, but certainly in this day and age when we're hyper busy and there's a lot of things vying for our attention, it really, I guess what I love about it is it just slows my mind down and I can really think. And I think on a number of different things, but I'm not talking to myself and I'm not talking to a microphone. I'm literally in my own head. That's who I'm spending the day with is myself and my creator. And I look at all the stuff that is right in front of me, and there's a ton of lessons there. And I think that's one of the things about this podcast show, Recognize, is that I'm constantly drawing lessons out of everyday observations and circumstances that present. So, one of the things that I noticed as I was walking through the woods, or several things that I noticed, but one that's very apparent to me are the trees, because the woods are made up of a lot of trees, right? But what's amazing to me is, and I guess it seems very obvious when I talk about it, all the different varieties, all the different species, but all in different stages of their life. So every tree has a life cycle, and they're all in different stages of that life cycle. And some of them live longer than others, even of the same species. And I saw some amazing, forces of nature that caused massive trees to just literally snap in half and crush other trees that were young, and they will never have a full lifespan. They will never grow tall and straight if they ever do survive, which most of those that get crushed like that don't survive. Eventually they decay and they turn into the fuel and the food for the future generations of trees that grow in the forest. And this life cycle is continuing constantly. And even these healthy trees that grow tall and straight and big and strong, they're dropping leaves every year. They're dropping branches and twigs, all different shapes and sizes. And those are hitting the forest floor and decomposing. And at one point, I was walking across slowly creeping along a hillside, and I was walking on what looked like a raised area of moss. And I realized that the entire raised area was once a very, very large tree that had totally deflated and compressed down to literally future soil. And it was very spongy, and it felt really nice and soft under my feet as I walked across that. So very interesting, but it was a 3-day adventure, and day one is always the most awkward one, and it's because I have not, been in this environment in an entire year to go back out there and try to figure out the land and figure out where the deer are moving and traveling and trying to find and locate sign. It takes time, and most successful hunters in these woods spend weeks at a time trying to figure it out, and I try to do it all in one weekend. So it's an accelerated learning course, but I always find that day one is the most challenging because I feel like I'm getting totally reacquainted with something that is really like a perishable skill, and it's like a very awkward beginning. And that's really point number one, is that beginning is oftentimes the most difficult thing for us to do, especially even if it's something that we have done before. But if you've left something for a period of time and you go to restart again, that is oftentimes the most difficult thing to do because it's awkward. It's there's a bit of a remembering period. And you're thinking like, did I forget something? Is there something I left out? Like initiating this podcast, for instance, just beginning it all over again each and every week. It's like, did I forget something? Did I leave something out? Did I mess up on the intro? Did I do everything right? So it takes you a lot more energy to get started. And I noticed that day after day of hunting, a couple days in a row, my getting out the door and getting ready, the time that it takes to get started decreases each day. And I become more and more efficient because of the repetition of it. So that's really point number one, that when you get out of a habit or a routine of doing something, it certainly is always more difficult to get started, but with repetition, it becomes easier and faster. And your time to getting into the activity, whatever it might be, whether it's a work activity or whether it's a fitness routine, it's going to be more efficient each time. And then you get into a rhythm, and that's where success lives, right? So point number two, I kind of alluded to it already, but I use some sayings you may have heard before for point number two, and that's Mother Nature and Father Time are still undefeated. And the reason I talk about that is that each and every one of us, we have a limited number of days. We have a limited number of weeks, months, and years on planet Earth alive here in this life. So our time is super valuable, and it is all going to run out on all of us. And it really is up to us how we spend that. Somebody said to me once, or I don't know if I read it somewhere, but if every day you had a bank account that had $1 million in it, but at the end of every day, after 24 hours, that bank account would be empty. What would you do with the $1 million? What would you spend it on? You had one day to have that $1 million. What would you do with it? Could you spend that $1 million in that one day? And would you spend it wisely? And then it would be gone, but the next day you would get another $1 million if you wake up. And that's kind of how time, is for every one of us. Every day that you wake up, you have $1 million worth of time. And what are you going to do with that in that day? Because by the end of the day, it's gone. And you might not wake up the next day. But most of us plan on waking up every day, but there will be a day that we don't. And there won't be that unlimited time because it does have a limitation to it. And, I saw that with a life cycle of just trees, for instance, in the forest. And I'm like, wow, each one of these, some of them they've been there, massive trees, hundreds of years, I'm sure. Just absolutely, like 3 men couldn't put their arms around these trees because they're so enormous. And then you have these other ones that, they're not real big and they're busted over and they've been crushed. So yeah, there's a limitation in all of our lives. So point number 3 is, and I talked about that too a little bit, is that there is purpose in everything. Okay, so in other words, like these life cycles of just say trees, for instance, and mosses and plants and so forth, even the leaves, they all serve a purpose. They all have a place in the ecosystem that makes up this forest. And the question is, how does that apply to us? And that is that we have a purpose. And a lot of people don't go through life ever really sorting out their purpose. They may find a job or a career that they go to, but it may not be something that they're passionate about, or maybe even that's even in their wheelhouse of what they're really great at. But the question is, what is your real true superpower? In other words, what are you really, really good at? And you may be thinking to yourself, what am I really good at? What am I really gifted in? And that's a really hard question to answer about yourself. So my recommendation, and other mentors of mine have always recommended, ask other people what they think your superpower is. And I don't want you to just go out there and put it out there to just random people in Facebook land or Instagram land or wherever, on Twitter. Hey, what's my superpower? But I want you to think about asking people that really know you, people that truly know you, and also people that you really trust and value their judgment or their opinion of you, because you'll get some interesting feedback from people that are acquaintances of yours. And it may be very superficial feedback, but the feedback I think that will be most beneficial to you are those that love you, know you, and care about you the most. Those are the people that truly know you for your superpower. And I think that's going to be a really good guiding light into figuring out how to develop the skills to hone your own purpose and to really clarify that for yourself. A life that's lived on purpose is probably the most meaningful way I can think you can live your life. Finding that purpose to get out there and do what you are born to do. And I asked that same question of a couple of friends of mine, and they said that one of my superpowers is my ability to tell a story about a life circumstance, or just kind of like what this podcast is, and to pull out lessons from that and explain it in a meaningful, easy to understand way. So I think that's pretty cool. It kind of speaks right to why I'm doing this podcast. So that's point number 3, if you're counting. And if you're taking notes, get ready, because point number 4 is coming at you right now. Point number 4 is relentless pursuit pays off. So the big question I know you're wondering is, how did you do? Did you get anything hunting? And the answer is no. I did not harvest any animals, but what I did do is I scored some super cool experiences. One of the things that I thought was super cool was I found something I haven't seen ever in the woods to this degree. I've seen it before, but we have a lot of black bears in this area that I was hunting, and I've seen black bears where they've scraped a tree, maybe seen 1 or 2 paw marks on a tree, but I literally saw probably 10 trees torn up and really just cleaned right off, where this black bear is just marking his territory. And It was super cool, and just it makes me appreciate nature that much more. And so my persistency and my persistence, I guess, in getting out there every day and spending the hours hunting until dark and using my map and my compass to navigate, through the woods and not get lost. It paid off. It paid off in the experience. Certainly didn't pay off in the filling my freezer with delicious venison, but and that's something that you can apply that to life, and that is that when you have a mission to get out there and go do something, if you're pursuing something, you're never going to get there without relentless pursuit. You might get lucky and you may have a couple of one-off success things that happen. Those are super unlikely, and they're not as predictable. Predictable success does come from relentless pursuit. And, the season's not over by any means. And I know that we will be successful before the end of the hunting season. For those of you that are animal lovers and hate this thought of that, I apologize, kind of, for your feelings not being happy about that. But anyway, point number 5, not everyone wins every time. And that's true. And that should never extinguish your passion or your fire for wanting to get out there and go after your goals and your dreams and your passion. It's okay. But here's the thing with not winning every time. A lot of people can get defeated and give up. And that's really quite a shame, because when we give up, then we kind of, I guess, give up on pursuing something, and it's you kind of shrink back down to what I would say is a very comfortable place. Like, you'll draw back. In other words, when you push for something and you pursue something and you don't get it, and you let that failure seep into you, and you then start to think that you're a failure, you'll oftentimes go back to what's comfortable, what's easy, which is, it's easy to stay in the cabin where it's warm. It's easy to have another bowl of chili and stay inside because it's raining out. And by the way, it rained and sleeted and snowed all weekend. So it wasn't great conditions, but enduring those conditions gives you an opportunity. So you can have, the pain that's involved in going forward and the difficulties associated with that, or you can have the pain of regret and just sitting back and, not doing anything. So you get to pick your poison, so to speak. In other words, pick your pain points. Everything's going to come with difficulty. There's going to be difficulties in pursuing something that's easy, because you're going to have some rough times because of your easy choices that you make. For instance, exercise. You could choose to not exercise. That's easy. Anybody can do that. But you're going to have to deal with the consequences of neglecting your health. So pick your pain. Your pain could be getting up and going and doing some exercise every day and the stress and strain of the exercise, but you're not choosing that other pain. You're reaping a different reward. So it's a risk-reward situation, but realize that you're not going to win, and you're always going to have some loss somewhere. So why don't you just pick what losses you're going to have and pick the one that's going to have the greatest reward? At least that's the way I look at it. You got an opportunity to make choices now. Don't wait until it's too late where you don't have those opportunities. So time is ticking for all of us, that's for sure. And I think we're about out of time for this podcast. So that's all for this week's edition of your weekly Limitless Life Network podcast. Tune in each and every week to stay tuned, stay connected, be inspired, and keep moving toward living the best life by stripping away your limitations. See you next time.